There's no doubt that California kicked off the surfing craze. I mean, the official sport of California is surfing. But what California area was the most influential? What a great debate, and let's face it, it's a heated debate, folks. California cities have gone to court against each other to fight over the Surf City moniker. I won't wade into that, but I will share the importance of the South Bay to surfing on PCZ TV. PCZ TV. Today's episode, Surfin' South Bay, Part 1, The OG. The South Bay has been called one of the cradles of surfing, and for good reason. It's a fascinating and convoluted tale which, ironically, includes many non-surfers as the key players. Part 1 of the series will focus on pre-World War II era, well, pretty much that generation, and do some then and now. So hang 10 as we jump into the Wayback Machine. South Bay surfing was all stimulated by this guy, the definitely not a surfer, Henry E. Huntington. He's been called a land baron and a railroad magnate, and if his name sounds familiar, it's because Huntington Beach was named after him, as well as many other areas and properties in Southern California. Henry is not from the South Bay, not from California, and is not a surfer, so what does he have to do with surfing? Money. See, Henry invested heavily in Redondo Beach real estate, and he also created the Red Line trolleys, the famous trolleys that crisscrossed Los Angeles in the early days. Now, he was looking for a marketing angle to entice folks to head to Redondo Beach, using his trolleys and staying at his property, the Redondo Hotel. It's all about marketing. And this is where the first actual surfer enters the picture. Now, Huntington had previously vacationed in Hawaii and saw George Freeth surfing. And yes, you can see the wheels in Henry's head turning. Henry brought George to Redondo Beach in 1907 as an attraction. George was the man who walked on water, and he exhibited his surfing skills twice a day in front of the Hotel Redondo. But George just wasn't a tourist attraction. He was also an innovator in surfing. The hardwood boards that were popular at the time were huge. They were about 16 feet and heavy. George cut them in half to make them more manageable, and in doing so, created the original longboard. George lived in Redondo and rented a room at 106 Pacific Avenue, which is across the street from the Redondo Pier. Now pay attention, students, as the Redondo Pier will come up later in this program. It's also been said that George and fellow Hawaiian surfer Duke Kanahanamuku introduced the sport to the United States. And tragically, George died at age 35 in 1919. But he and Duke planted the seed, and surfing's popularity slowly increased, with the first competition in California in 1928. Surfing gained popularity, and surfboard construction continued to undergo massive improvements through the likes of surfer Tom Blake. We'll get back to Tom in a second. By the mid-1930s, just to the west of Malaga Cove, Bluff Cove became the prime spot to ride particularly large waves. It was even sometimes referred to as Little Waikiki. And it became a favorite spot of those early Southern California surfers who were members in the Palos Verdes Surfing Club. And speaking of the Palos Verdes Surfing Club, it was founded in 1935 by John Doc Ball. Based at Bluff Cove, it was just the second surf club formed outside Hawaii. Surfing culture then was not quite what you think of today. The Palos Verdes Surfing Club, or PVSC, was a club of gentlemen. Members wore a suit and tie and refrained from smoking during the regular meetings. Each member owned a matching green jacket displaying the PVSC logo, and their 100-pound surfboards were adorned with the same insignia. Sounds all a little bit stuffy, doesn't it? Another surfing legend of the time, E.J. Oshier, shared that, back before the war, the aloha spirit was very prevalent with all the surfers at the time because everybody knew everybody. But the Palos Verdes group were entirely different from the San Onofre group. He said the San Onofre group were a pretty goofy lot. Besides Palos Verdes being one of the first spots that surfing took off in, it also led the way in innovation. As mentioned earlier, one of the founders of the PVSC, Doc Ball, was one of the early innovators of surf photography. He began shooting the South Bay surf scene in 1931 while attending USC's dental school, hence the doc. In 1937, he built his own waterproof camera housing from pine and developed the habit of paddling out with it strapped beneath his teeth. The Palos Verdes Surf Club met a somber end when America entered World War II. Nearly all the members joined the military, with many opting for the United States Coast Guard. All through the Second World War, surfing culture went into hibernation. The coast became an armed camp. There were blackouts and air raid warnings. The beach was often barricaded off, sometimes by barbed wire, and the Coast Guard and the National Guard patrolled the beaches. Palos Verdes itself was bristling with cannons and spotlights and observation posts. The ocean became off-limits to civilians. Needless to say, surfing was frowned upon. Doc recalled that during September of '44, he got a big surprise. He saw the new issue of National Geographic, and it contained his surfing photographs. Well, after the war, surfing's momentum picked up right where it left off, with the South Bay now front and center. After serving as a Coast Guard dentist in World War II, Doc dove even deeper into surf photography and compiled more than 150 photos of the South Bay and Southern California surfing for his 1946 book, California Surf Riders. Leroy Granis, another early member of the Palos Verdes Surf Club, learned surf photography alongside Doc. Granis himself was born and raised in the South Bay and Hermosa Beach, and in 1964, he co-founded International Surfing Magazine, which had a print run until 2017, when it eventually merged with Surfer Magazine. He's credited as one of the godfathers of surf photography. Palos Verdes would also become home to the next major innovation in surfing. And as soon as Tom Blake was done with his military service, he headed for the beaches, first to Waikiki, and then to the South Bay, and in particular, Palos Verdes. Now, Tom was a surfboard innovator. In the 20s and 30s, before coming to the South Bay, he revolutionized surfing by designing the first hollow boards, dramatically reducing their weight. While in the South Bay, Tom worked at the Palos Verdes Estates Swimming Club, and then made a switch to the Portuguese Bend Club a little further to the south. And now we introduce a new character into the story, Jamison Handy. Tom, and Jam as he was known, would pioneer the next major leap in surfing while in Palos Verdes. Tom built Jam a board, and Jam, being enthralled with surfing, built his wife a balsa board. The beauty of balsa wood is that it's really light, so she could carry it down the steep cliffs of Palos Verdes. But balsa is super soft. Every time she used it, she would get a ding. So Jam got the idea to cover it with fiberglass. Now, he knew about fiberglass because of his time in the war, and thought of using it even before it made it to the West Coast. So he sent the board back to some friends of his on the East Coast who had it fiberglassed and returned to him. No lesser legend than Tom Blake attributed the creation of the first fiberglass board to Jam. Well, that was then. and this is now. What became of the OG? Well, Henry Huntington's Redondo Beach fell into disrepair. The city eventually purchased the hotel and its grounds and tore it down in 1924, and the area is now a city park. The red car trolley system likewise fell into disrepair during World War II, and afterwards the rise of the car and the new freeway system put the final nails into the trolley coffin. The man Henry hired to popularize surfing, George Freeth, is memorialized in a statue. George himself was inducted in the Surfing Hall of Fame, as well as the Surfing Walk of Fame. Doc Ball's memorialized in the Surfing Walk of Fame. Leroy Grannis is memorialized in the Surfing Hall of Fame. Tom Blake is in the Surfing Walk of Fame, as well as the Surfboarders Builders Hall of Fame. Jam Handy never received the Surfboard Development Innovation credit that Tom gave him, but he is in the Swimming Hall of Fame. Bluff Cove, of course, is still there and still attracts surfers to this day. The swim club in Palos Verdes that Tom Blake worked at still stands near Rat Beach. It's been rebuilt multiple times, but it still survives. Unfortunately, the Portuguese Bend Swim Club was destroyed in 1956 during a large landslide that destroyed the club facilities along with approximately 145 houses in the community. Well, we're going to stop right here, right on the edge of the 50s and 60s, as another surfer generation in the South Bay will soon rise into prominence, and which will be covered in Part 2. If you've been watching so far, I thank you. Bye!